Goodness gracious me. That button worked. I'm going to have to remember that button next time. Hello everyone, and welcome to a Thursday Live. Which I have done recently, and I have been back doing recently, but I of course didn't do last week because I was off getting I was off attending a dinner. I didn't expect to get an award, but I did. Speaking of said award, I moved it for its own protection earlier. Where did one move it to? Oh, it's over there. One moved it over here. That is good. And it seemed fair I should show it to you a bit today, as we start off and wait for others to join us. I have to say, there's also something else. I was going to be talking about this lovely book from the lovely Nicholas Rogers today, but I'm not going to present it to you because it arrived literally today, and it's bashed to blazes, courtesy of Amazon. So it's going back and they're hopefully sending me another one, because, yeah, I don't expect it to arrive bished and bashed like this. But it has got an interesting point in it about how many people involved in the production of warships for the Royal Navy prior to World War II and during World War II ended up working themselves to death. Always a fun one, that one. Hello everyone! Yes, we have a woofy poodle there. He's telling off a cat. Hello. We've got hello Peter Dawson, hello Carl Gasberg, hello Leslie Mitchell, hello John Shea, hello Tanner Philippa, hello Michael Cooch, hello Paul Amos, hello Adrian Verdun, hello Runon, hello Stephen Meier, hello Shandalord Shandal, hello Lion Top, hello Felix B, hello DG40, hello Byron Newman, hello Stephen Richards and John South. Hello everyone. How are we all doing? Now, if I quickly make this disappear for a second. That doesn't look untidy. Too bad. It's a removed house. There you go. There's the certificate. Which I wasn't expecting to get because I was a runner-up. I wasn't expecting to be anywhere on the results, let's be honest. Here's the list which included Drac NFL. But, yes, I got runner-up for my services to promoting naval history on via YouTube and other social media at the Maritime Foundation. I was not just happy to be nominated. I wasn't expecting to runner-up or anything like that at all. So, hello lions. Stop telling off a cat. As I keep explaining, you are bigger than him. You do not need to woof at him. You are so strong, you do not need to shout at him. You could crush him with one thrust of your mighty paw. Do not feel the need to tell him off for staring at you across your own front garden. The cats have been living next door to here for far longer than you've been living here, and now that poor cat hurriedly runs in front of the gate, doesn't come in the front garden at all. Hasn't even come face to face in terms of the physical face to face with the poodle. Has only had the poodle the other side of the door. Now, admittedly, the poodle in question, head is probably about the same size and mass as the cat in question, but we'll leave that to one side. The hardback comes out today. The paperback comes out in June next year. Verdun. Hardback comes out today. I pre-ordered it, so I got it delivered on the day. So I would get it delivered. I spent extra money to get it pre-ordered, so it would get delivered on literally the day it came out, so I would have time to read it, because it's a mighty thick tome, so I could read it properly and then tell you if I was going to recommend it to you for Christmas. And I did all that because I thought that's a sensible thing to do, because it's going to be a major book, and if it's good, it's going to be good. And yes, it's Kindle, but, you know, let's be honest. If you're going to be recommending it for a Christmas present, you want to recommend it to people in the hardback proper form. If you got a cat, after what shit would you name it? Our dogs are called Raleigh and Zebedee. We've had Mozart, we've had Montgomery, and we've had Lucy. In the nicest way, if you think I was going to be lucky enough to get to have a cat and name it after a ship, I'd be a very, very lucky person. Mummin's betting on the cat over the poodle. Bigeron. So would I in actual fight, but at the moment the cat's running scared of the poodle. Because of the size of the poodle. So, today's question is a rather interesting one, and I have been recording. And by the way, I hope you're going to enjoy tomorrow's video, and there's going to be, because of last Thursday being a premiere, instead of it being last Thursday's video as a live, Saturday, there's going to be a video on the Battle of, well, let me check it out, which one was it? I recorded 2 battle videos. Battle of Santa Cruz tomorrow is going to be coming out on Saturday. And there's going to be a key aircraft video tomorrow, so there should be lots of ones for you to watch over the weekend, if you're interested. Also, tomorrow I think I'm going to be live on Armchair Admirals, and then after Armchair Admirals, I'll do a Twitch stream. Still, what name would I propose? That's what I say. If you've got a cat, it's got to be lion or tiger. Yeah, this cat is not that brave. He's keeping to the other side. Well, she's keeping to the other side of the gate from this one, a good 18 feet away. Ooh, very nice foot on. Actually, and that's the other thing we've got coming up. We've got Historiathon coming up at some point, and there are going to be some things I'm going to have to explain about that before it happens. But I'll probably do that in a brew ships. I'll get good old Fu to interview me, or Ruinon to interview me and discuss it through, all the quirks that are going to be in the Historiathon for all of you to enjoy. It should be fun. No, I would never name the cat Beatty. That's cruel. I think it's only the Battle of Santa Cruz. Armchair Admirals is on Twitch, I think, and it's done by World of Warships. It's the thing which me and Drac get involved in when we do the historical streaming on historical streaming discussion thing, which is basically, I always see it as a way to promote history. It's a great thing. In return for the ability to be able to completely say whatever I like, I accept no money. But they do owe me a large, giant, stuffed torpedo. And I do emphasize on the words large and giant in that, because it is supposed to be a massive, stuffed, fluffy torpedo is supposed to be coming my direction. If so, that will of course become the new weapon which is being wielded by the Orca above me. I'm not sure about that the cabal that's gathering together. The Orca is possibly either the most dangerous or the least dangerous of that particular group. We can all be very, very worried about them. Has the Corgi escaped and found a bull to chase yet? Now you Look, this is going to sound strange, but where I used to live in Epsom, I was surrounded by horses on fields. In fields, that's where I lived. I lived right on the edge of Epsom, right on into looking at Headley and the Downs and all those areas. Now the Corgi's in properly into the country. He's very, very excited. It's not necessarily about bulls he's excited by, though. He has found lots of people who are willing to stop and pat him. Kingdom of Finland, that's very much a question for the joyous the joyous thing that is brew ships, rather than this particular video tonight, because it's a topic video tonight. But I would say quickly, so the thing is, I'll answer it quickly, but I won't. It's not as full answer as is. If you want to spend the amount of money you need to spend to do it, yeah, you can. You can do anything if you're prepared to spend the money. Is it worth it? Well, this is a debate I'm going to be getting into with Fu at the Red Fleet timeline at some point. Hello, Gorbian. Yeah, that is the funny thing. You can win stuff on World of Warships for World of Warships on Armchair Admirals, and if you don't actually play the game, It doesn't matter much. But as you'll know from my Twitch streams recently, when I get really frustrated by Frostpunk, I go and play World of Warships because it's easy and I can just go and take the frustrations of dealing with Frostpunk 2's stupid political system out on poor people who are just trying to have some fun in World of Warships. And I mean really take out the fun. There is one which hasn't been recorded where I was the last ship standing and I was a battleship, and yeah, there were 3 cruisers left. None of them had torpedoes. It was not a good time to beat them. It was not a good time to beat them. They were all gathered in one spot and they would have won it if it hadn't been for me turning up and blasting them to pieces. Oh. Admittedly, I was in a 21-knot battleship, so it took me a while to get there. So, Helgoland. It's useful. As you can see, it's kind of a critical position. If you want to blockade Germany, or it's very, very useful for that. The Kiel Canal, Elbe, all these things come out into this area. You've got lots of key ports and positions around this area. Basically, if you control it, you control this area. Which is why it was very much beloved by the Danes. It was very much beloved by the Danes. And that's the sort of the scenario you're dealing with. It's very much beloved by the Danes for the control it gives them. It's very much beloved by various powers for the control it gives them. When it's given to Britain, Britain is seeing it in many ways as a method of achieving some power each. But this is the point. This is the location we're talking about. We're talking about somewhere which is really in the backyard of Germany. And that's a problem in some ways in this scenario, because you have to remember this is handed over to Germany in 1890. And this whole discussion is going to take us into what happens if it's not handed over in 1890. And that's not necessarily good for anyone involved, although it does make Britain's job tremendously more simple, let's say. Did Britain see it as the next Gibraltar? Well, that's a discussion for why Britain accepted it, and the treaty reasons. There is a very real scenario where if Britain had seen it as another Gibraltar, it wouldn't have been handed over, and that's basically... Hello, Fly, what are you doing in here? That's basically going to be part of the discussion, because the only reason I can see for Britain not handing it over in any of the treaty negotiations from 1890 onwards with Germany for some easy wins is if they do see it like Gibraltar. If they begin to see it like Gibraltar, then they're never going to hand that over. Now, David Goring, was it Drac that won? No, Drac didn't win. In fact, it was River Action which won. It was rather interesting. I think that there are... How do I put this? From the discussions I had, they were very keen on Shipshape entering as a group. Because I think they liked what Shipshape do as a group, and I think, who knows, we might have a chance of winning next year as Shipshape as the group Shipshape, rather than individually. I think individually, I tick certain boxes, Drac ticks other boxes, and I spent a lot of time trying to work out why I was runner-up and Drac wasn't a runner-up, and why I got that lovely certificate and Drac didn't. And there are the first answer I came up with. Well, it's because I've actually been here tonight, but they didn't. They didn't for a lot of other for some prizes there weren't even runner-up. There wasn't even any awards given to runners-up. And for others that were not everyone who was there got an award. And even for ours, I realised there were 2 potential winners who were in the other tables who didn't get anything. So That made me look at the other thing, and the thing I noticed throughout the evening was most of the winners had done stuff with schools. And I do stuff with schools. Drac doesn't, as far as I know. He's never spoken about it with me, about him going into schools and doing talking with them. And I've never seen anything on this channel about it, so I don't think. And I think that was sort of one of the criteria going in. But the thing is, we do that stuff, and he does do that stuff as part of Shipshape. And I think, therefore, with if Shipshape had been in the competition, I think Shipshape as a whole might have won. So this won't involve someone taking Helgoland. No, it's basically the scenario is Britain never gives back and never gives Helgoland back and never gives Helgoland to Germany. Britain would gladly have Calais back though, just for funsies. Yeah, you say that. It would shift a lot of problems from this side of the channel to that side of the channel, which people might not like. We'll leave that to one side. So basically, it's useful because it's geography and location. For the both, from perspective of everyone involved, it's going to be a bit of a nightmare to try and manage. And Kingdom of Arden, I'm not ignoring your questions about midways, etc. Those things. It's just it's not appropriate for today. So I might. If someone can please save those, I'll either get them at the end of today's discussion, or I will get to them in brew ships on Sunday. Okay. Thank you, whoever can do that. It's history. We start off with the Treaty of Kiel. Now, you have to remember the Treaty of Kiel basically ends the Gunboat War. It's part of the Sixth Coalition, which means it's part of the Napoleonic Wars. But yeah, it's about ending the Gunboat War. It's about ending the war between Sweden and Britain on one side, and Denmark-Norway on the other side. Now, at this point, Denmark-Norway are the same country. They're a combined crown. And as part of the treaty, Swedish Pomerania is supposed to be handed to Denmark. Norway is supposed to be given to Sweden. And Helgoland is given by Denmark to Britain. The problem is, Norway decides it wants to go independent and elect its own king, which then means Sweden doesn't hand over Pomerania, but don't worry, the British make sure they get Helgoland. Peace does get sorted out. Eventually the Prussians get Pomerania, and the Norwegians eventually have a come to Sweden moment. And what they do is decide to have their constitution, but then elect the King of Sweden as their new king. So it combines the two while keeping Norway separate. It's an absolute fudge, and you can tell British diplomacy is in it. And basically, the entire scenario, the entirety of everything is being done by the British to keep the French out of Scandinavia and Germany. And remember, Germany is not a country at this point. Germany is a collection of different countries. It's a region. It's all sorts of principalities and places. It's not a country. And keeping France out of it is a key part of the British ambition. So it's a key way of counterbalancing France. So basically the whole point is Britain takes its territory, the idea that if necessary they can fortify it and turn it into the Gibraltar of the North Sea, if they need to help them keep the French out of this region. And to stop the French influencing and causing problems for the British in this region. And so that this region is basically beholden to the British. They end up not needing to, because for pretty much the next few years, France, whilst it gets its mojo back occasionally, is pretty much for most of the next century, or the next 100 years or so, a basket case. The vast majority of the next 100 years, it was a basket case. So Germany wasn't there at this point. We're talking about Prussia mostly. We're talking about these things. And then when in 1890 the British do give Helgoland to the Germans, it's in the Helgoland-Zanzibar Treaty. And basically, for the British at this point, well, A, Germany now exists, and Germany can do the job of keeping the French out of the Germanic regions. And Britain can afford to give up Helgoland because it's done absolutely jack with it for the last 76 years. It's done absolutely nothing. It's let it be. It's prospered quite well. It's pretty much just gone, as long as you don't cause any trouble, we won't get in your way, you don't get in our way, and everyone's happy. And the reality becomes that for Britain, giving up Helgoland, which is incredibly politically significant to the Germans by this point, it is. Someone wrote an article comparing it to Argentina and Las Malvinas. It's not. It's nowhere near. The amount of frothing at the mouth, egotistical obsession over Las Malvinas is nothing compared to the Germans over Helgoland at certain points in this period. Honestly, and I say this with the nicest respect to both sides involved, the Germans were getting incredibly irrational about one of their summer holiday spots being British. Because it's a really small island, which really doesn't matter unless you're at war with the British. The entire thing is, it only matters if you're at war with the British, because they're the only ones who are going to use the base. No one else is going to occupy it. They actually at one point had a thing of, what happens if the French occupy it and try to use it to wage war on us? The British would crush them. It's quite simple. If the French were so stupid as to occupy any British territory, it doesn't matter whether the British really want it or not, the British will go to war against them in this period, and the Royal Navy will massacre the Marine Nationale at sea. Because the Marine Nationale is the most absolutely weirdest navy in the world at this point. It's the most suffering navy in the world at this point, thanks to various governments and the Jeu de Colle. So the entire idea that the French would take the islands off the British. Let's be honest, during the Franco-Prussian War, did the French at any point consider taking Helgoland off the British? Possibly. At the same point, they realised that their lives would cease to exist very quickly if the Royal Navy actually got involved in the war. Considering how badly they were doing against the Prussians, the Royal Navy would just be using them as target practice. Because whilst the Royal Navy had its own issues at that point, they do not have the same issues the French have. The British issues at this point are mostly to do with officers being stuffy, and frankly, a few of them dying in combat because of stupidity would soon deal with most of those problems. So pretty much, the Germans are given back Helgoland. In return, the British get some key parts of Africa and get to surround everyone in Africa and control German access to the sea in Africa. It's amazing. Look at the treaty. And then look at it and go, yeah, it was a win for Germany. The thing was, they did feel it was a win because they got Helgoland. Pretty much, Gorbin. Yonk's Helgoland, and France, Yonk's Helgoland, and UK. And I took that personally. France and Britain at that point, Yonk's back whatever it wants of the French Empire. France goes, we used to have summer in the sun. Britain took them all. Basically the point at which Britain goes, you took Helgoland, that's great. So we've taken Vietnam, we've taken all of the African territories which are actually interesting, i.e. none of them, and we're taking all your Middle Eastern territories because we feel like having them. And perhaps we'll take your Caribbean territories because you can never have too many holiday spots. It's just not a good scenario. It's kind of... How do I put it? It's up there with the books written in Germany about the Greater Union. Okay, if you don't know this, there was a concept put around by some authors in Germany in this period and we're talking about 1880s, 1890s, about the greater union of not just Germany unifying, but all the Germanic peoples unifying. And by the way, that included Denmark, Norway, and Sweden and Finland all unifying into the greater Germany, plus most of the Baltic states areas, etc. It's an intriguing thing. I'm calling it the Greater Germany because that's one of the translations of the topic of the content, but there are other ideas. It's just a fun piece of history to read. A friend of mine who specializes in German, let's call it political literature of the period, gets a lot of fun at every academic dinner discussing this stuff, and all of us going, wow, YouTube really are pushing this revenue increase of the whole. They're just telling me the creators adopting live automated mid-rolls saw an average an uplift of 20% in in-stream ad revenue per hour. Learn more now. No, thank you. As much as I love the idea of earning more to fund more books, I don't think I'm going to do that. I have enough fun when you put the mid-streams on the lives after I've done it. What about St. Martin? Let's see. Any questions I need to deal with in the chat? Except Switzerland was never considered for Greater Germany. It was, Felix. Do not get the idea that Switzerland wasn't in. It's just most people have a very quick realization when it comes to Switzerland. Invading Switzerland is never going to go well. If they're considering Austria and Hungary to be part of the Greater Germany, with the Hungary being the territory being part of the Greater Germany, the Hungarian people have to get out of there because they're not the right people. The Austrians are acceptable. You get fine. It gets fun. Charlotte, would the British take over every, and I mean every French island, including all out the coast of the continental front, all of those? Possibly the Royal. It would depend on how annoyed the Royal Navy would get over them trying to take British territory. It depends how. This is going to sound. It depends how annoyed the Royal Navy decide to be. Also depends how active various commanders decide to get. No, it was not really considered worth it. No, it was. Switzerland wasn't. It was considered. They did talk about it, but they thought that the language for it was that it would be embraced into them. I think the idea was that they would win in Switzerland over joining it, not force it to join it. It's always embracing rather than. How does this? They talk about the other territories as needing to be brought into the fold. They talk about Switzerland as being embraced into the fold. Again, though, this isn't really my expertise. You'd have to have my friend on here to have this chat. It's fun. Basically, nice way, Stephen. Britain's entire approach to France for a long period is France must not have anything ever. They're kind of like my Corgian over the Corgi over the poodle getting food. Oh. Yeah, and Seneca also, I would say there are some authors have different areas they include. So there are some authors who do just include Denmark, Austria, and the Czech German-speaking areas, and there are some who go for the full cabana, the everything. I think that's another one for brew ships, Finland. Finland, definitely another one for brew ships. So, saying that, let's consider this little event from World War One, because here is the thing. This tells you all you need to know about Helgoland. The first battle taking place, if I'm not mistaken, on 28th of August 1914. The first battle of World War One was the Battle of Helgoland and Blight. And that shows you there are two spellings of Heligoland. The modern spelling usually is Helgoland, but the older spelling is Heligoland, especially in English. And this is why I have the spellings, both spellings in the title, and I'm talking it through as if there's both spellings, because it seemed appropriate to give it the name it is, which is Helgoland now, but it also seemed appropriate to give the treaty and all these things in accurate phraseology. Now, the thing is, this battle takes place because the Germans have a really predictable patrol schedule. And whilst Beatty turns up with his battle cruisers, he's never part of the battle and was only there as a covering force in case, well, they said High Seas Fleet comes out, but let's be honest, it's if Scouting Group comes out. Because the actual force is led by Reginald Tyrwhitt and Roger Keyes. And it's the Harwich Force. Yes, it's the submarines, cruisers, and destroyers of the Harwich Force. Which basically ambush a load of some cruisers, torpedo boats, and minesweepers of the German Navy, of the Kaiserliche Marine. And it's a massacre of the Germans. It's everything the Harwich Force is ever praised for in one battle. They are absolutely mean as anything. And you can see it in the results. The British suffer 35 killed, 55 wounded, a light cruiser damaged, and 3 destroyers damaged. The Germans suffer 712 killed, 149 wounded, 336 captured, 3 light cruisers sunk, a torpedo boat sunk, 3 light cruisers damaged, 3 further torpedo boats damaged. It's a fun thing in this period. How do I put this politely? The German losses in that battle is truly devastating, because if you consider losing 3 light cruisers, and I cannot overstate this, 3 light cruisers, the Germans didn't have that many light cruisers to begin with. They had 3 light cruisers lost and 3 damaged. So that's 6 of their light cruisers, and their light cruiser force was their smaller force, was their force which was most likely to be, how to put it, they were always critical, because to build the High Seas Fleet as they had to build their instead of destroyers, they built torpedo boats, concentrated on them, and they hadn't really built them as big as they could have done if they hadn't been concentrating all the resources into the High Seas Fleet, into their capital ships. And the cruisers had especially suffered. Yeah. And this is the battle where the Harwich Force are not even fully warmed up. As Michael Couch is pointing out there, this is the force which sets about what the Royal Navy is going to be coming in for, what they're going to be capable of. And it's also worth realizing that they have multiple forces out there to back up this force. They have multiple forces out there to back up. At certain points, Winston Churchill had suggested that they send the whole Grand Fleet south, but Sturdy had managed to resist that idea, and had managed to put it was going to be a force of armoured cruisers and battle cruisers covering it. And they did well. It was Jellicoe who decided that Beatty should be there, by the way. The original covering force was going to be HMS New Zealand, Invincible, and Cressy, Abercur, Bacchante, Hogue, and Euryalus, the Cressy armoured cruisers. It's a nice force to have there, I suppose, but yeah, it's Jellicoe who, when he learns on 26th of August, 2 days before the battle, what's happening, Finally learns it. He goes, no, we're sending Beatty, we're sending Lion, we're sending Queen Mary, we're sending Princess Royal, and we're sending the first light cruiser squadron of Goodenough's command, all instead of that other recovering force. So we're sending Southampton, Birmingham, Falmouth, Liverpool, Lowestoft, and Nottingham. Jellicoe also brought the Grand Fleet out, all just in case Tyrwhitt runs into trouble. Jellicoe also sent a very nice note to Tyrwhitt, which basically wished him luck, but also told him that if he got into trouble, there would be reinforcements, and do not worry, just make for the reinforcements. And the thing that interests me about this battle is, this is a battle where, frankly, the Germans don't have to... they do need to contest this area, and the British don't have to contest this area. But again, this is taking place very, very close to Germany. Very close to Germany. It's the Heligoland Blight. Again, if we go back to this map and expand it to full, you can see just how close Helgoland is to this area. And the Blight is in this area. It's a problem for the Germans. It really is. So imagine if Helgoland had been a British fortress at the time. And what would the British have had at Helgoland? Well, we're getting into this more in a bit later, but yeah. Well, why would Britain keep? Why would Britain keep hold of Helgoland? And all these things become points. I would say this: if France had been more proactive towards Germany in that period, the Germanic area and Scandinavia in that period of 1814 onwards, then instead of going off round the world so much, then I can see Helgoland getting fortified and turning into the Gibraltar of the North Sea. In which case, it will become far more closely associated with British strategy, British ground strategy, and the British public and mentality. In which case, the British are never going to hand it over. It's like Gibraltar again; it'll become a British overseas territory. That's just the way it will probably be. The British will never hand it over. So what the British have there to protect it? Well, probably torpedo boats, and destroyers, mine-laying facilities, and submarines. Helgoland is not large enough to start basing capital ships out of. It's not even as large as Gibraltar is. But it is large enough to cause trouble, and it's large enough to be used as a base. But we'll get into that. I'd also like to point out this. The Harwich Force. The force which, as I've said in the past, if they hadn't been held back, if they'd been allowed to attack at the Battle of Jutland, would have probably caused major troubles, because by the time they'd have turned up, it would have, depending on how you read the timings of their turning up, they ever turn up when the first battle the first battle turn is carried out, or the second battle turn is carried out. They literally cover... So, in the first battle turn, or the second battle turn, if they turned up at those points, basically the Germans would have turned to disengage from the ground fleet and run straight into the Harwich Force. Just imagine what happens then. Because, A, the Harwich Force are going to be signalling, the Germans have come our way, on their radios as loud as they friggin' can, but also, they're going to be letting torpedoes fly and doing everything nasty they can to get into there. In which case, the Germans then will have the Grand Fleet coming down hard from behind them, the Harwich Force coming in front of them, and they'll be squashed in the middle. There's a good way to lose a lot of ships in both scenarios. Well, in this scenario, you probably get the Harwich Force would actually be the Helgoland Force. Think about that. Think about someone like Tyrwhitt and Keyes, those two officers in charge of forces at Helgoland. The Cuxhaven to Helgoland ferry takes 70 minutes today. Yeah, the ferry takes 70 minutes. I'm sure that doesn't go as fast as a destroyer does. It's not good. So with that, it appears to be time for a shameless book plug. Now, thank you to everyone who's bought my books. Thank you to everyone who supports the channel by doing all the super chats and all the super thanks and all those things, because they do make a difference. I hope this will be the last month all the funding has to go towards bookshelves and other things in terms of that nature. But I'm not sure because, let's be honest, I haven't opened up the other boxes yet. But I am hoping to buy, with especially the money I receive from Patreon, etc., all the stuff for all the things for the legs for them, etc., and the more shelves. I'm still shocked by the fact that my office, my little brew shack back home, did contain, well, these cubes, right? They are standardized cubes. They're great spaces for books. I have in here, I kid you not, there are 8 times 8, which is 64, and a further 2 times 12, which is 24, on the 64, 88. There are 88 cubbies in here, in this room alone. And there's space for another 16. I've calculated with all the stuff that I'm storing in here for the lounge for the girls. And yeah, all 88 of those are full, and there are books on top of the shelves as well. It's massive. And I'm still getting more books. Books are arriving. As I said, this book arrived today. We're going to have to get, hopefully, a new version of that is going to be sent to me. I've complained to Amazon. And all sorts of fun things. But, yeah. There are books always arriving. There's a lovely book I'm looking at on Amazon at the moment, which is another book in Japanese. And it's on Mitsumasa Yonai. And, like this rather excellent tome, which I have, thanks to Google Translate, I can go through them and read them. And I'm really interested to get Mitsumasa Yonai's book. And that's all I can do, all that. And I can do all the research, and I can fund the book writing, and I can fund, to an extent, the picture procurement. There is going to be a Historiathon, which is going to explain more about that, etc., and a few things in November. And these things, because of you. Because of your support. I, as a historian, am kind of weird amongst my colleagues. I don't compete for grants as a whole. There are occasionally a couple I'm interested in looking at, but mainly things like I would love to get a fellowship at Cambridge. I don't need a funded fellowship. I've worked out I can sustain my research funding and my work for my online teaching from pretty much anywhere. So I could happily do that in fellowship accommodation at Cambridge. And then I would be able to sit in the archives there, because otherwise, let's be honest, spending enough time in the archives in Cambridge is kind of difficult if you're just commuting there. You either need to live there or, stay there for a few months. So I'd love to do a 3-month fellowship at Cambridge or Oxford and plunder their archives shamelessly. I really would do, especially about the Tsingtao events, because there's stuff in their archives. But those are the sort of grants I can afford to concentrate on applying for now. And the other grants you need for just being a historian to fund the costs of research, because I do love it. Academia is so set up for, I would consider it, independently wealthy persons. In that, if we consider journal articles don't pay you. You don't get paid for a journal article. You don't earn any money for a journal article. You have to publish in journals to keep up your academic standing, and that's a great thing. The journals themselves charge for access to them. Huge amounts of money. But you don't get paid for writing a journal article. You get paid for writing a magazine article, but not a journal article. And we then go into the book sections, and we talk about the books. And these books, they have 70-odd pictures in them. And the average picture, well, it depends which one you're talking about. Imperial War Museum, still very, very expensive. Other places, to an extent, cheaper. But you're talking average for picture rights for a book. Not even picture rights including digital publishing rights, but just for physical books. You're talking at least £100 a picture. If once you've got digital publishing rights as well, which you need to have for Kindle to be able to produce them in digital books as well as use them on the internet if you want to, that's probably £250. And if you're talking Imperial War Museum, that's £500 for that photo. And this is the reality of what we deal with. And all that money has to come from somewhere. And this might re-explain the history books that you're seeing these days. There are some very good ones, but they're usually written by the same names. And new names entering the field are becoming increasingly rare, and I'd say it's because of the cost of actually writing the books in terms of the research trips and the pictures. And I can do all that because of you. Because of something I started during COVID, because some friends were complaining to me that I should really do more with my YouTube channel. And I was stuck at home and really not enjoying the fact I wasn't getting out to teach people. Because I enjoy sharing history. I believe the purpose of learning history is to pass it on. So thank you. You're what makes all this possible. You're what makes all the history I do possible. And hopefully now I'm moved and everything's organised, there's going to be a lot more coming. As said, I've got 2 books written up. Pretty much. I need to edit them. But the only thing they're short of is the pictures. I'm not, unfortunately, an independently wealthy man. I really am not. I do, I do wish I was. It would make my life a lot easier. I don't even want to be an independently wealthy man. I'd like to just be an independently comfortable man. Just enough income coming in a month that I didn't have to worry about the food bills and I don't, it's not accessible on food bills. Didn't have to worry about the food bills or the car bills or all the other bills. But no, that's not the way my life is. That's fine. So this way, with the funding from all you, basically I work to fund or pay all those bills, and then your kindness, your support, pays for all the research trips and stuff. So thank you. Thank you. It hasn't always been that way, isn't it? It's why historians used to be basically wealthy gentlemen, madmen who went around the world and wrote about what they heard. Yeah, that's pretty much it. That is why history is the way it is. That is why a lot of academia is the way it is. That is the history of academia. Look, let me put it this way. Verdun. If I have enough money coming in and enough sustained research, someday I might put together the 45,000 word book on a Blackburn that you seem to be dreaming of. And if I do it, I will do it properly. I might release it on April Fool's Day, but it will be an actual proper book, and it will be properly researched. But it's not going to be anytime soon. Let me get a few books published and get a far more stable income before I start doing something like that on something which, is not high on my priorities at all, because seriously, why such an ugly aircraft? So, that all said, let's consider the economic situation in the 1890s if the British have kept hold of this. If the British have kept hold of this. Well, economically, someone did suggest that if you've got Gibraltar, if you've got Helgoland, that Germany's economically stuffed. They're not. They're only at a disadvantage if there's war. In peacetime, the Royal Navy and none of the British are going to start interfering with German trade. They're not going to interfere with the Kiel Canal. They're not going to interfere with anything. It just becomes a problem for them in war. The fact is, they were building the Kiel Canal before they got control of Helgoland, so that obviously doesn't really bother them. So the thing is, economically, it's going to have no impact on Germany. None at all. Politically, well, and this is where I start getting into the thing. I want you all to think. You're not allowed to use Google for this. You're not allowed to use all the search. I want you to think. Who was Chancellor after Bismarck? How many chancellors were there between Bismarck and World War One? What did they accomplish? What did they do? When do you start thinking that? Because the thing is, Bismarck falls, Wilhelm has that victory, and he gets this, and this in many ways shows people, oh, look, he's achieved this without Bismarck's aid. This is a great thing. It shows he truly is capable. He's not. He's really not. But politically, if the British have this, it's a constant thorn in his side. It's something he's constantly going to be aiming for. It's going to become his sole focus in life. What's interesting is it might also force it to become the Navy's well, how do I put this politely? It's going to become everyone's focal point politically. The Army, Navy, both are probably going to be involved in thinking about it. And it's going to become something which they're going to focus on. Because in any war scenario with Britain, the first thing they're going to go is, we must retake Helgoland! We must take it! For Germany! For the Volk! For the Kaiser! Yeah, militarily, this is going to be a problem. With Kiel and El both being sealed up from it, it's got high cliffs, as you can see from this lovely picture of it. It's not exactly somewhere you want to take, and it's 46 kilometers or 29 miles from the shore, at the closest point. It's really not somewhere you want to engage, and if you think about it as well, in terms of artillery range, it's just beyond what you can comfortably start hitting from the shore. No matter how big your guns, comfortably hitting this is not going to be much of an option. Admittedly, that means it's going to be a bit far for it to comfortably hit you from there. But your shipping channels... oh yeah. That's going to be the issue. Your shipping channels will go right out past it. So militarily, it's going to become a focal point. And that's a problem. That's a problem for both you and for the British. But not so much a problem for the British as you'd figured. If everything becomes focused on the defense or attack or taking of Helgoland, then for the Royal Navy, it becomes a very simple thing. There is going to be a decisive battle early on in the war. And that is going to be against whatever fleet the Germans send to try and take Helgoland. And you just have to make sure Helgoland is strong enough that it's going to require the entirety of the German high seas fleet to crack. And then you design it to hold out. It doesn't have to hold out forever. They have to hold out long enough for the Royal Navy to arrive. We're talking days. The Germans had the rocks, the Helgoland covered with 17-inch guns and various other things. It was very fortified, very heavily fortified. And that's what the British will probably do. The important thing is going to be, have they fortified it already, though, to defend it against French? If they are the French. If they have, then politically they're not fortifying against the Germans, they're just keeping the fortifications up to code. We're just keeping the fortifications up to standard. No, it's nothing unusual. Standard improvements, standard works. You know, there's no point having fortifications and not keeping them up to code. Keeping them up to date. No point not doing that, not having it that. What are you talking about? You're finding it threatening. Oh, good lord. Are you planning on attacking us then? Well, then there's nothing to be frightened about, is there, old boy? Let's have a drink. That's the style they've got to be going for. Now, there is a sandbar off there, and we'll be talking about that in a bit. We'll be talking all through this, but basically, the strategic situation is going to be not much different other than the German political and military machine is going to be heavily focused on this point. And militarily, if they're in a war, it's an absolute nightmare for them to try and deal with because of its positioning. It's being just close enough to cause maximum problems, just far enough away to be difficult to deal with. Now, how will the British continue to secure it? Well, yes, you do have the lovely sandbar, and you could put some fortifications on there. You could, on the dune. But you don't necessarily need to. In fact, in many ways, that could be an advantage to not fortify it. To leave it open. Make it attractive to the Germans to come and seize it and place their own artillery there so you can destroy it. If they can see that as the easy weakness that you can make it into, they will focus on it. Or they might ignore it completely. But the whole point is, you have to be able to stand long enough for the Royal Navy to get you. So it's not siege you have to worry about, it's rush. So emphasize that. It's not siege you have to worry about. The Germans aren't going to be able to hold there for months, because if there's a strong enough fortification there that they have to bring the fleet to attack it, they can't afford to have that fleet then in that position when the Grand Fleet turns up. So it's a problem for them. It's a massive problem for the Germans. For the British, it's about defending it from rush. And even then, you have to think about it. Well, what happens if the Germans rush troops ashore and they take the town and the harbour? Well, that's a problem, yes. But as long as they don't get up to the fortifications up on the cliffs and the higher land part, you're fine. As long as they don't get a firm foothold up here, you're fine. Because they're just trapped down there. It's kind of like Jersey. If you've ever been to Jersey, you'll notice the fortifications around are positioned quite literally the idea of, so you can land here, that's lovely, but as long as you don't get to control the fortifications, none of the positions you take are tenable. None of them. Hi, Cornish Mitchell. And this forms a problem for them. So, basically, the Germans can rush in, but you have to stop them getting up the cliffs. You have to stop them getting up to the high bit. So you can actually defend the harbour, though. You can try and defend these things to stop them rush in, and I would personally recommend you do so. But you also have some good protections to make sure if they get any, if they do get harbour, they ain't getting any further. Also, there are going to be torpedo boats there. There are going to be submarines based there. There are going to be destroyers based there. The British will have the full set there of light forces and light flotillas. Everything there to stop people being able to cause trouble. They're probably also going to have mine layers. Or rather, the facility to quickly convert vessels into mine layers to lay mines in the case of war. So that they make it even more difficult for people to rush it. Oh, sorry, did you hit our minefield? Oh, we do apologise. And as said, to my mind, the British might do what they did in other parts of the world, where they left things like the dune completely uncovered by defences. And they just made sure it was well dialed in with their artillery. They actually, in some cases, made it their artillery range. So they would be practicing firing their guns on those areas on a regular basis. So A, there's a whole load of unexploded material there already for when you come ashore. And B, their guns are nicely dialed in. Oh, they're on the dune. And what position they are? Oh, they're by that stump where Jonesy managed to bounce a shell off 2 months ago. Oh, that was funny, yeah. What was what he program put in the dialed into the guns? Oh, yeah. That. Boom! Oh, I do believe we annihilated them. Oh, what a shame. Their artillerymen and their artillery gun have all gone. That's terrible. What's for lunch? And that sounds pretty callous to put it like that. It really does. But there again, we're talking about a very callous... We're talking about artillery shelling each other. And at that point, it's a pretty callous business. Would German naval artillery? No. The German naval guns. No, they're not going to have that range. If we consider, I'm looking for their 15-inch guns details in my set, but of course it'd be pretty much their 11-inch guns. But yeah, we'll talk about their 15-inch guns. 8.3-inch, no. Go through the list. I've got a full list here. If we consider their 11-inch guns as fitted on Seydlitz, Moltke, Goeben, etc., they had a... Let's see... Rate of fire, gun range, ammunition, characteristics, bursting projectile range. They had a range of roughly 21 kilometers. So 29. So this is just too far out. 46 kilometers is just too far out. I've got notes here. I've got it all the way back here. I have got notes there. Yeah, it's 46 kilometers, 29 miles. It's it's very much too far. Even at their World War II range of the 11-inch guns, which was 38 0.6 kilometers, they're not getting it. They're not getting there. That was at 49.5 degrees of elevation. It's going to be well beyond World War I range artillery. Ooh, sausages for lunch. Very nice. I had burgers for lunch. Definitely Gibraltar 2.0, probably to it depends on Turga. The maximum range of the Vickers is about 4,100. The entire sandbar could be covered from the main island by machine guns and artillery. Yeah, it's not a good position to attack. You go, yes, we go to sandbar. Yes, we can't go anywhere but the sandbar, and we're in range of all their weapons. Oh, great. Yeah, it's not a good position for the Germans to try and deal with. So the British can really strengthen it. Which leads us to the personalities. Let's consider Kaiser Wilhelm, right? He was absolutely ecstatic to get Helgoland back. We are talking about a man who's both obsessed with the idea of being British and absolutely despising the British. Who cannot understand at the same point as he's being rude to his uncle on a regular basis and trying to out-British his uncle on a regular basis, and regularly upsets his uncle's favourite sister, who is Wilhelm's mother, on a regular basis, why his uncle doesn't think he's amazing and the sun shines out of his behind. Honestly, I'm not surprised the man ran into troubles. He has an ego the size of a small moon. Unfortunately, it's a small moon wrapped around a collapsing star, in that he's both got a massive ego and a massive inferiority complex. It's an amazing combination. Now, yeah, Chandler, we'll get into that in a second, because I'll talk about the reality of Zeppelins. It's a fun one. The problem for him is he is eminently predictable in some ways by the British diplomatic corps and service. You know, the Helgoland-Zanzibar Treaty is really a great exercise in a one-sided treaty. Go have a look at it. And then look at what the British get versus what the British give up. And you'll realise what the Germans get is none of it's very good. None of it's very useful. For the British, it's brilliant. It allows them to surround everyone and really strengthens their position in Africa. For the Germans, it looks good, but it isn't good. And they've been stopped from examining it because they are so happy, or rather someone is so happy and so obsessed with getting Helgoland back. This means that German strategic sense is probably going to become rather monotheistic, in that it's going to become all about getting Helgoland. Yes, there is going to be desire to get certain territories out of French, but the Franco-Prussian War pretty much gets them that anyway. Yes, there's going to be a desire for territories around the world. Yes, there's going to be all that. But let's be honest, the big focus of this man, of this ginormous ego, is going to be to get Helgoland back. That's going to be what he's going to be thinking about. And that's going to cause trouble for everyone. Because, as I've said, the big problem for the Germans in their fleet construction was that, despite basically not building enough cruisers at all, and this is covered in my Building the Fleets of Jutland video, but I'll go give it a quick pro-say now. Despite not building torpedo boats, or rather torpedo boat destroyers, as big as they could do, they all to build the battleships of the size and scale they need to within the budget they have so they don't interfere with the army, they still run into trouble politically over the spending. Now, the thing is, they're building all of that as a fleet to try and deter the British from fighting. Now let's consider this situation. What hope do you have to deter the British from fighting if you're trying to take a part of their territory? Anyone? Do you think the British aren't going to turn up and fight? So now you're in a strategic situation where you have to prepare, if you want to achieve the goal of your Kaiser, You have to fight the Royal Navy. You have to. And the problem for the Germans is that's going to change lots of different things. There are already some ideas going on in the chat about, well, you know, the Germany develops the 38 centimeter, 300 millimeter max earlier. I don't know if they do. I honestly do not know if they do, because their coastal artillery batteries could achieve 38.6 kilometers technically. Could achieve it. That's still short range compared to the distance you need to go. And the thing is, if you're investing in guns which are bigger and longer range, that's lovely. But you've got to consider what you're going to mount them from. If you're just going to be putting them on coastal artillery to bombard Helgoland, that's kind of an offensive thing to do. And the problem for Germany is if they do something like that, they're giving the British cause for, but are also giving Britain justification for investing even more money in the defence of Helgoland. See the problem? Anything you do that is obvious like that is just going to be used as justification for Britain to spend more. And it doesn't require much more money for them to defend Helgoland a bit more. It requires a lot more money for you to crack it under this scenario. And the Kaiser, who is obsessed with looking as powerful as he is, who really loves the uniforms and the gaudiness of it, is going to get swept up in everything. So, again, the problem is going to become, do you have the money to invest in those things? Thank you, Jack Ray. Do you have the money? Do you have the time to invest in those things? Because, again, you've got to worry about the Navy, and you've got to worry about the Army. And the other thing is, you might find, and this is especially true when we start considering the next person involved in this discussion, you might well find that the budget battle between the Army and Navy comes to a head earlier. And it might be that the Army turns around and goes, well, if we abandon the idea of getting Helgoland back from the British, instead invite them to use it to defend our coast from the French, we can have an ally against the French and the Russians. Because that's who's Britain's traditional enemy. The only reason we're getting into this fight over the value of Helgoland, etc., and all these things, is because we're investing in the Navy. So it's a self-fulfilling, self-creating policy and prophecy. But for the Germans, the big thing is going to be for Tirpitz is he basically tries to build the Royal Navy in miniature. That's what he's trying to do. There is no sensible reason for battlecruisers. But let's be honest, he's going to be making the case for battlecruisers in this scenario. We're going to waste hulls on a fleet, on ships to go find the British fleet when we know where they'll be. That's the trouble. Everything you can use to justify battle cruisers for the German fleet doesn't exist in this scenario. We're going to go hunting the Royal Navy for economic warfare advantage. Okay, so we are going to go out through this direction. No, we're not going to go straight onto the North Sea coast because, let's be honest, we'll have to go past this island, and they'll probably put a hole in us with their large guns. They've got 18-inch guns or something. No, we can't deal with that. We're going to have to go out through the Øresund, past Denmark. Oh, great. So we're going to go out that way. In which case, we'll probably, by the time we actually get out, because we'll probably be seen going, the message will be radioed to the British. There'll probably be a squadron which will be suddenly waiting for that battlecruiser to get out to go hunting. Okay, so it's not going anywhere. The first scanning group aren't going out to do their raiding. Oh, that's a problem. So, yeah, that's a problem. And his problem is going to be he's going to have to be figuring out not just a battle fleet, but landing ships. And he's not going to be able to avoid the discussion of funding for other things, let alone the arguments he's going to have with Holzendorf. This is going to be a very complicated operation. Now, there is, if he can persuade the army to get involved by the idea of seizing it, and I have no faith he will be able to, because frankly, the army might not want to get involved. The army might look at it and go, "You want us to do what? Against that? Have you seen that? That's where crack regiments go to die. That place is literally defended by Royal Marines and Gurkhas. They have machine guns. They have heavy artillery. They have no known version of mercy. They will only stop firing when we have surrendered and are all crying." This is not a good position for us to go. I will provide you with heavy artillery support. Well, you'd better do. But the thing is, this could well force him to adopt a very different policy when it comes to ship design than he did traditionally. A very different ship focus. And that, again, is going to affect things. Because what we might have is the Germans, and I'll talk about this later, pursuing an 18-knot fleet, and the British pursuing a 21, 24-knot fleet. Because for the British, what's going to matter is how quickly they can get to Helgoland. Because the quicker they arrive, the more trouble the Germans are going to have. Because the stronger the fortifications are when you arrive, the more the Germans get caught between a rock and a hard place. The more they get themselves into trouble. Ramal, to answer the question, because I always do answer this one, I think it's about $3. I think the cheapest patron is £3 a month or something like that. Patron suggestions are supposed to go live after this video. And yeah, submarines are going to be up there on his threat list. He's going to have to deal with mine layers, all sorts of problems. Helgoland is going to become a noose around his neck, which focuses all his focus. The Battle of Helgoland is going to be it. It's going to need to be the decisive battle. And whoever wins that is going to win the war. That's going to be the whole German image. And it's going to be, to extend, an image for the Royal Navy as well. Think about that. The Battle of Helgoland is going to decide the war. Whoever wins it gains control of the North Sea. But this does mean that for the Royal Navy the Germans have to come out in their full fleet to try and win. For the Germans, they have to hope that the Royal Navy turns up in bits and dribs and drabs so they can defeat them in detail, not en masse. Then they have to withdraw, probably. And if they lose, even if they withdraw a lot of ships, if they lose, they've lost the North Sea. And at that point, the Royal Navy can do what it likes in that area. Colin Cameron, if there was a repulsed attack on Helgoland, then in British mythology it would become the three bastions of Gibraltar, Malta, and Helgoland. Yeah. It's going to be just goodness gracious gravy. there is going to be no end of trouble for it, and it's going to be a focus of German defense spending and for this entire period. Sorry, I have a poodle who's currently spreading his legs and going, "Pat me." I do not know. Seriously. I wondered why I kept getting whacked on the back, and it was because you want to be patted. Oh, I don't know. Poodles, so demanding. Now, I said earlier about the Chancellors. Here you go. Here are the four. Leon von Caprivi, 1890 to 1894. Ludwig zur Hohenlohe Schillingsfürst. Yeah, that one's just terrible to try and pronounce. Bernhard von Bülow and Theobald von Bethen Holzwig. We think poodle treat. We think the poodle should have a treat, do we, Blackburn Maximus? Okay. There you go. I laid him some biscuits next to his head. It's stalling on lives more and more. I'm not sure why. It's doing okay at my end. It's not registering any problems at my end. But if it is stalling, I do apologise. I have no idea why it would be. Should be okay. But realistically, all these leaders, all of them, are spending their time trying to balance the Kaiser's ambitions and trying to balance a political pyramid. You're going to add them a massive thorn in their side. None of them are what you would call grandmasters. None of them are great statesmen of their era. And the trouble with that, the trouble with all of that, is that Germany had been set up to be run by such a person. Bismarck, who, for all his good points and bad points, had been the one who'd moulded the Germany of this period. He'd set it up in his own image to be run by someone who was such as him, to be run by someone whom he selected to succeed him, who was going to have the sufficient qualities to do the job. His fall, precipitated by Wilhelm's ego, which he himself had stoked, but which precipitated his ego, begins an ongoing saga of issues for Germany. A saga of leadership which is just not quite up to snuff. And they try their best. I would say Bülow and Holzwig are definitely two of the better options, but Caprivi and Hohenlohe Schillingsfürst are frankly... they tried their best. There are some funds going on YouTube, apparently. We'll see what the updates are like. So, all these chancellors will be faced with the problem of balancing the army and the navy. The Heer versus the Kaiserliche Marine. And balancing all that with Kaiser Wilhelm. We're talking about a man who... How do I put this politely? This is one of the stories about the Zanzibar Treaty, and you have to remember, when I say things aren't written down, that lots of things are not written down in history, that we have stories, rumours, things we can go on that sort of seem to be true. You have to remember that that's because they're not written down on purpose, or they're not in scenarios where they can be written down. A good example is a diplomatic conference when you're actually trying to negotiate these things. The Germans and the Kaiser, specifically the Kaiser, were very focused, sorry, moving things around, on what they wanted to get out of that treaty. And what he wanted out of that treaty was Helgoland. The British didn't at first put it even on the table. Why? Why would they not put something on the table which they knew their counterpart really wanted? Quite simple. They wanted to see how much he was prepared to offer for them to put it on the table. Before they even actually offered it, they wanted to see how much he was prepared to give them to have it on the table. And he turned out to be prepared to give them a lot. When we look at the treaty, and it is a fun treaty, you realise very quickly that it becomes as one-sided as it does because of him. Because he is prepared to offer the British pretty much everything they want in return of getting Helgoland on there. And that's why the Treaty of Helgoland Zanzibar turns out the way it does. Now the thing is Helgoland really worth that? And if you consider that's the game he plays in 1890, imagine what goes on as time ratchets it on, as different leaders fail to get him this bauble, fail to deliver him. Does Caprivi last even as long as he did historically? Does he last those 4 years? Or does he go a lot quicker if he fails to get it? If he doesn't bring home the bacon? Doesn't have that great glory to his name? What about Holland Schillingfirst? If Caprivi's not replaced in October 1894, who replaces him? Is it him? Is it not him? Is it someone else less capable? Someone else more capable? Is it someone more aggressive who promises to get the Kaiser what he dreams of by fair means or foul? It's a problem. And sorry for the hiccups then. Sorry to hear that, Jacob. Hope YouTube sorts itself out. I don't know why there are issues going on. It's said it's not affecting my end at this precise moment, but it's telling me I've got an excellent connection and everything, but I don't know what's going on with you. So it'd be an oops, the Kaiser, well, not the Kaiser falling down the treaty, if it stairs and broke his neck for the treaty to fail. It's basically if the treaty doesn't succeed, then the chancellors are going to be in trouble. Remember, this is the other thing about the Kaiser you have to remember is he got rid of the most powerful man in German politics. I was struggling to remember this when I recorded the video for next Saturday, the recorded version of this, but Lord Tywin Lannister, as Hand of the King in Game of Thrones. You've seen all the videos. There is the short which goes around, which I've sort of, I have to say, watch most of my Game of Thrones experience comes from watching the shorts, where he sends the king to bed. And basically responds to his own son, Tyrion, that if he believes that the king is the most powerful man in all of Westeros, then he's a fool. Well, that was the reality of the Kaiser as a relationship with Bismarck as Chancellor. Bismarck was the power behind, not just the power behind the throne, he was the power in front of the throne. He was the power deciding what power the throne could use. And the Kaiser had got rid of him. Do you understand how powerful that makes the Kaiser in the face of these politicians? He got rid of Bismarck. Getting rid of any of these is going to be nothing for the Kaiser. Nothing. And that becomes a problem for them to live with. It truly does. So just in mind, what kind of fleet do they build? Well, here's where things get interesting. There are two options you can go with. Either you can say they don't change at all. They go with the same fleet they did historically, and they try and fight it out with the British with basically the Royal Navy in miniature. Which is always a possibility. It's always a possibility someone's that silly, but you'd hope they wouldn't be. Or, and this is the likelier option in my mind, they moderate some of their ideas. What's the moderation going to be? Well, do your battleships need to do 21 knots, or can you afford them to be 18-knot ships? If you can afford them to be 18-knot ships, then you don't need to worry about investing in turbines. You can continue on triple expansion engines if you really want to. And let's be honest, for getting to Helgoland, you don't necessarily need that amount of power. What do you need? Well, you need a lot of armor. You need a lot of survivability, because if you're going to know you're going to be fighting outnumbered, you want your ships to be individually as survivable as possible. You want them to have as many guns as you can possibly fit, and you want them to have as much armor as you can possibly fit to make them as survivable as possible. But they don't need to be long-ranged. But there again, the German ships weren't long-range anyway. You just don't need them to be necessarily fast, because they're not going to go somewhere that it's going to be fast. You know where the fight's going to be. Let me put it this way. Another way. You know, and the British know, the battle's going to be at Helgoland. And that's going to be the battle that matters. And so your whole fleet is going to be built around that. That's going to be a problem for Tirpitz. It's going to be a problem for everyone, as their fleet is basically going to be built around this massive battle. I think this means fast vessels like cruisers and battle cruisers just don't exist. Because, again, you don't need them in this fight. Now, there's a problem with that taking on the British, because I think the British still do build battle cruisers. And I think if their battle cruisers could do anything, I don't think they'd come part of this battle. Again, the British don't really need battle cruisers for that reconnaissance in this battle. What they need the battle cruisers to do is strategic mobility. In which case, the battle cruisers might head for Oresund. And while the battle's taking place, they could be coming into the Baltic from behind the German fleet. And think about that as a strategic option. You've sent your whole fleet through the Kiel Canal to fight to gain control of Helgoland to secure the North Sea, and the Royal Navy battlecruiser force comes charging down through Oresund onto your Baltic coast and is bombarding away, scarboroughing and Hartlepool-ing you. Think about that. And yes, the German fleet would be a heavy coast defense fleet. That's pretty much it. That's pretty much what we're talking about. It's going to be a lot of armor, a lot of firepower, but it doesn't need to be fast. It doesn't need to be long-ranged. And they are going to be capable. Yes. But how capable they're going to be is, again, up to everyone to think about. What do the Germans get involved in? In this timeline, do they get involved in the gun race? They're not getting, do they, if they're not worried about speed, if they're not investing in turbines and not spending money on battle cruisers, do they use that money saved to start trying to race up the gun calibers? Blackman Maximus, in this scenario, there isn't going to be necessarily Dardanelles. Because here's the problem. In any war scenario, if the longer the Germans leave it for there to attack Helgoland, the longer they leave it in the war, the worse it's going to be. The more heavily fortified it's going to be. The thicker the minefields are going to be around it. The more defences there are going to be. The more likely there's going to be aircraft operating from there. The more destroyers there are going to be operating from there. The more submarines there are going to be operating from there. Your best chance to win the Battle of Helgoland is going to be within the first week of the war. That is going to be your timeline. If you take longer than a week to get those reinforcements, to get your forces to take Helgoland, if you are longer than a week with that attack, you're out of the war. That's not going to be an option anymore. There's going to be too much force there, too much capability there. You're never going to be able to take it. I would argue it's got to be first day of engagement. I would argue you've got to do it immediately. I would argue. The point also becomes for the British in this scenario, in this kind of battle, what are the pre-dreadnoughts used for? What are the dreadnoughts used for, but also what the pre-dreadnoughts are used for? Because they become almost as useful. Because let's be honest, in this fight, you're going to be facing the German pre-dreadnoughts, so you might as well bring your own hordes of pre-dreadnoughts. If you can any ship you can arm, you want to come on to the fight. Yes, they're not going to be able to keep up with the dreadnoughts and not going to get there as quickly as the dreadnoughts can. But that doesn't matter, because when they arrive, they're going to be extra forces coming in. Your dreadnoughts probably will be strong enough to win the fight, especially if you've built them sensibly, to win the fight alone. But when the pre-dreadnoughts turn up, that's going to turn the fight into a party. Because your point is going to be to try and push the battle back through German defences into Germany. If you can push your fleet, if you can get a ship through the Kiel Canal, fighting its way up the Kiel Canal, now that's something you'd be far happier risking pre-dreads doing than dreadnoughts. You're going to be such a happy admiral. Especially if you have got those battle cruisers into the Baltic. And seriously, the thing becomes, do you have to do the distant blockade of Scarpa Flow and the blockade? I'm just getting into that, Lions. Well, the Royal Navy might still do the Scarpa Flow, probably will do Scarpa Flow, because that's a good blockading position. But will the fleet necessarily be based there? Potentially. It's a good place to base the fleet from a training perspective. Also, think of it this way. For the British, if they leave Scarpa Flow and are sailing across the North Sea to Helgoland, A, it's not that not that long a route, realistically, but also, B, this important thing to consider, they can do all that without ever going in sight of land. So it's far more difficult to tell when the Royal Navy's coming. As a timeline goes, Scarpa Flow becomes a very interesting base to have from the point of view of denying your enemy an idea of when you leave. For the Germans, the interesting thing is going to be the destroyers and the smaller vessels and what they build, because to my mind, that's going to be a particularly scrappy force. It's got to be. It's got to be a force that's designed to fight its way through the problems that are going to be chucked at it, and there are going to be a lot of problems chucked at it. They are going to be overwhelmed at several points. They are going to be having to deal with firepower. For the German Navy, investment's going to have to be massive. And you're not going to save any money on the capital ships. As said, not building battle cruisers is great, but you're going to spend that extra money on armor and on guns for the battleships. You have to, in order to make it work. You have to. Would we see something really strange like a central battery ironclad being beached on Helgoland and covered in Maxims and mortars? There are all sorts of options, but what I would say, and the point which has to be sort of remembered for this scenario, and I'm trying to keep it the same line so my head doesn't disappear. I do have a marker for the line. There we go. Not sure why the camera and... Well, there's not the camera which keeps moving, it's the screen it's on is slowly moving for some reason. I think I need to find... I'm not sure if I put all the screws in that screen after we moved. I think the Germans are going to have to think clearly through what they're going to have to build in small forces. Because, as I said, it's going to be a scrappy fight, but it's also going to be a fight where they're going to want to maximise their efforts. The interesting thing is going to be submarines and anti-submarine warfare. And the fact is, this is going to be well within range of German submarines, but also if the British submarines are operating from Helgoland, it's going to be an absolute nightmare for the Germans. Because war that gets declared, and suddenly those submarines are happy hunting, and anything heading out towards Helgoland is going to be fair game. Yes, you might sink the British submarines, but the problem is, in the ranges they're probably going to be, in the positions they're going to be, they're going to sink something of yours. Large and important, probably. Take care, Carl. Yeah, there are. What you are going to find is there are going to be a lot more British battle destroyers which are going to be viable for this operations, and you're going to, because if the German battleships are slower, and the British are going to pour them in. There's also the fact that if you've got Helgoland again, I wasn't joking when I said instead of the Harwich force you could have the Helgoland force. And again, imagine what the British are getting up to with that force. But also imagine the likelihood of that force taking severe losses. Because it could well have the entire high seas fleet bearing down on it. And we were talking about Zeppelins earlier and Zeppelin bombing it. Well, that's probably going to happen, yes. But also, think about this from the perspective of the Germans. Trying to do Zeppelin raids on the UK, and the UK being able to mount fighters, if they can build fighters which can go high enough altitude, which they did as the war went on, from there. Where's the best place to defend British airspace from? Helgoland! Where we can stop the Germans before they even leave their coastline. Just imagine this. Imagine the issues to the German airships. Imagine what effect it has on German airship procurement as well. If they can't really get their aircraft to sea, do they procure them in the same fashion? Do they go for heavier than their aircraft, which have a higher speed and can therefore maybe get past the Helgoland defenders? Or do they have to do a saturation bombing campaign on the defenders themselves? What's going to happen on this? It's all going to be very interesting. And yes, they are probably going to go for some sort of... Well, let's put it this way. If Holzendorf gets to set the tone, it's going to be some sort of asymmetric defense. But the trouble is, if you've got Tirpitz still calling the shots and selling the Kaiser on building this great navy, then you end up with a problem of you will need to execute asymmetric warfare with definitely not asymmetric weaponry. And also, you have to remember there's a problem with asymmetric warfare. It's at land, it's viable. On the sea, There is a long history of navies trying to execute asymmetric warfare and losing. And there's a reason for this. On land, there are places for you to hide. On land, you can have a supply chain. You can keep these nodes operating together. At sea, once you're out there, you're on your own, and you're a long way. And whilst you can cause damage, it's usually the advantage is on the defender who's hunting you down. And you might get away with it once, but you won't probably get away with it a second time. And again with the asymmetric warfare, well, the advantage the Germans could do is try and build a minefield, but do you want to try and lay a minefield in range of the guns of Helgoland? That's going to be difficult. In range of their own torpedo boats and destroyers out there patrolling, that's going to be interesting. And in case of Britain's own minefields, okay, so mines might not be the option. Okay, so submarines are going to be the option. Well, that's a good choice. And that is going to be the problem for the British in charging in there. But the thing is, the British submarines are going to be as much of an option and a problem for you as their submarines are for them, and as your submarines are for them. And the thing is, the British have more submarines. In the beginning of World War I, they have more submarines. And resupplying, well, you'd think resupplying would be very problematic, and in World War II era, where you've got aircraft and air power dominance, it would be. You'd be running straight into the enemy's aircraft and the threat zone of the aircraft, and you'd be trying to mount a combat patrol from Helgoland to hold them back, but it's going to be exhaustive and it's going to be expensive in both personnel and aircraft, as well as other resources like fuel and ammunition. But in World War I, if you've got the base set up there and you've got it defended, then realistically the British are coming directly from their home nation where they have all their infrastructure just across the North Sea, which is the easiest route for them, to Helgoland. And Helgoland itself protects them coming in. To get out past Helgoland to find them, as a surface ship, you have to go past Helgoland. And that can be made as difficult as possible. So, yeah, the British can resupply Helgoland quite easily. And reinforce it quite easily. So, whilst there are options for asymmetric warfare, whilst there are options for trying to deny it, it's all going to depend on your willingness to do it. And you have to remember, again, the other problem you have in this scenario is the British will have a lot more. British are always, and this is always the case versus the Germans, the British always have a lot more ships because they're always prepared to build more ships. Because the problem for the British, for the Britain, the navy is the essential component of sea power, which is the essential for their empire and defence and security of their home islands. For Germany, it's the army, which is the essential one. And there's a difference in the funding battle for if you're the central service versus if you're the principal supporting service. So, World War I in this scenario becomes tight. It really does. As you can see, that's cool. There is the German blight here, but if you notice, look where the Helgoland blight is. Look at it. Look how close that is to Germany. That's within the German blight. There is the German blight, the German area, and then there is the Helgoland blight inside that. That's where we're talking about having the fight. That's where the battle is. It's not good, is it, Big Fluff? It's not good at all. It's very tough for them. What do you wish for? A biscuit? Okay. It's either a biscuit or something, or the one they're outside. Let's try the bickies. There you go. The problem for the Germans is in this scenario is going to be if you have a World War I scenario, you have shot yourself in the foot dramatically. Because they either attack, as said, they have to attack Helgoland immediately. Which means you have to have a battle there. And the only way, if the British have designed defences right, and this is the criteria, and if we consider the defence of Gibraltar, etc., if they're on a par with that, then it will be right. Then you are going to have to take a significant portion, probably your whole fleet, to do it. In which case, there is going to be a scenario for the Royal Navy where the whole German fleet is going to be gathered in one place. You're going to have friendly fortifications there, friendly support, submarines, minefields, all these to support you, knowledge of the area, and as long as you have a telegraph line between you and Helgoland is intact, and you can probably make sure that's okay, you will have all the information you need about where the German fleet is. Think about that from the British scenario. That is incredibly advantageous. At that point, the Royal Navy turns up in force, in strength. And as said, if I was the Royal Navy in that scenario, I'd send the battle cruiser force through Öresund into the Baltic behind them and start embarrassing them. Whilst you're fighting the High Seas Fleet all in around Helgoland, the battle cruisers have gone through to the other side into the Baltic and doing fighting in there, and you've brought everything across to fight the Germans. Everything. It'll be a massive battle, but it'll be a battle where the Germans, if they fall back, they lose. The Germans have to win, and they have to win by having to sink the British fleet to be able to secure it and achieve the win. If they don't, then they're in trouble. Then they've lost. If the German fleet is forced back to harbour, if the German fleet has to retire, the British have been attacking in the Baltic, and they have just forced them away from Helgoland, at that point, the German fleet is out of count for the war. The surface fleet is off the action roster, because their only way will be to go through Öresund and Skagerrak out into the North Sea, through Danish and Norwegian territory, pretty much, and Swedish territory to get to the North Sea, which means they're going to be spotted the whole way, and it's going to be even easier for the Royal Navy to intercept them and stop them getting home. Again, think of Jutland, think of how the Germans retreated home through minefields, and think of which route they went. This wouldn't be possible in that scenario. So, and also, that's it, depending on how many resources actually survived this battle. Again, we'd look at what's under construction for the British, what's under construction for the Germans. What are the British likely to be able to replace their losses with? What are the Germans likely to be able to replace their losses with? And there will be losses on both sides. But I have a scenario. The scenario in this is basically the Germans are going to be caught where they're going to be fighting, and then the British are going to turn up. And you might go, well, how long are the Germans? That's the other problem for the Germans. They're going to be expending ammunition. They're going to be suffering damage. They're going to be attriting while they're out there. And how long is it going to take the British to turn up? 2 days? Maximum? Let's be honest, we could be talking less than a day. Or less than 24 hours. So they turn up at Helgoland. Let's say it's day 2 of the war. Well, the Royal Navy knows what they're going to be doing, so they could be on their way already. The ground fleet could already be poising. They could be getting ready for them to launch their attack. Get committed. Get into position. It's going to be an absolute slugfest. It's not going to be a battle maneuver. And it's also going to be pretty much the worst scenario for the Germans, because all their abilities are going to be completely, all their advantages are going to be minimized by this scenario. Because, as said, for the British, okay, if it's not going to be a battle maneuver, bring the pre-dreadnoughts, bring the older destroyers, bring everything. And chuck it all in. There's going to be no holding back the Harwich force, or the Helgoland force. There's going to be no holding forces back for other battles and future engagements in this scenario. No, it's going to be chuck everything that's available into this mix and see what comes out. it's going to be a nightmare of a battle. An absolute mess of a battle. But the thing is, the British will probably win it because of the sheer amount of resources they'll bring into it. And because you haven't got time to prepare prepare it otherwise. Maxis, for a propaganda victory, would the Royal Navy battlecruisers go all the way to Russia? Let's put it this way. If the Royal Navy wins this battle, and by winning I mean the German fleet doesn't retreat in order to the canal and back to home, but actually the German fleet loses significant portions of its strength, then yes, they do. But Maxis, there is I have no idea for what that scenario is going to be. In the nicest way, there is no scenario to talk about in terms of what are the likely British response to be, because you have to remember the British are still going to be building to deal with the Americans, the Japanese, the Italians, and all the other powers building dreadnoughts. So British design always reflected more the design ethos of the other ships, other nations, because they were pushing the boundaries more than the Germans. In this scenario, the Germans might be pushing the gun caliber boundaries, as well. In which case, the British might be jumping up even more. But what guns are they going to pick? Are they going to pick the 16.5 inch? Are they going to pick? There's always the case of with the 50. Do they pick the 15 inch? Do they pick the 18 inch? Do they pick the 14 inch? If the gun calibers have been racing up in the 1890s, the Lord Nelsons might be starting already on a 14-inch gun, in which case Dreadnought starts on a 14-inch gun. And if they start on a 14-inch gun with the Lord Nelsons, then either they go a 15.5-inch gun or do they go a 16-inch gun for the Orions. And if they do that, the Queen Lizards could well be on an 18-inch gun. Then who knows what the next gun's going to be up from that. There is so many different scenarios. I don't want to get into the specifics because you're entirely off on something we can't really predict in this scenario. Did they have mine-laying subs at this point? Yeah, there were already experiments going on with mine-laying subs, and that would have been part of it. Both the Royal Navy and the Kaiserliche Marine were on that idea. Yeah, nicest way, it wasn't a couple of days before outbreak of war. It was a few weeks before that. There was a visit in Wilhelmshaven, a visit to the harbour of the Royal Navy's battle squadron. But they're not going to be based at... They're not going to base a battle squadron at Helgoland. There are two reasons. One, it's not big enough port facilities to sustain it and support it, and there's nothing you can really do to the island that's going to be doing that. And two, you don't need to. It's far better to use that space for destroyers and torpedo boats and submarines that you have, and have the battleships back further, because it also means they're safe from surprise attack. You have a surprise attack. Oh, you damaged some of our destroyers. That's terrible. We have hundreds more. How are you feeling now? You feeling good? Good. It's going to be a very, very messy scenario. But it's also going to mean that, honestly, World War I could actually have ended up being over by Christmas. Because if the German fleet is beaten in this battle, then, as said, the British then could have battlecruisers wandering up and down the Baltic. They could send pre-dreadnoughts up the Kiel Canal if they really wanted to cause trouble. And they've got control of the North Sea coast. At which point the Germans might well be forced to negotiate a peace. But there's also the scenario the Germans don't come out. The Germans don't attack. In which case, the Germans are under a close blockade, in effect, thanks to Helgoland, on their North Sea coast, and they basically are trapped into the Baltic. What does that do for World War I? Well, it means the Royal Navy probably never gets a battle. Probably never gets a battle. Or you still might have the Falklands and Coronel and those things, but you might never have you might never have a battle. The Germans just sit in harbour for the entirety of the war, the German High Seas Fleet. There'll be no Jutland, nothing like that. I'm not sure about you, but I think that could lead to an incredibly frustrated Royal Navy. Well, you okay? You trying to get up on my lap? Or do you want something specifically? Okay, before we go to the final slide, I think I'm going to put someone in the garden. I'll be back in about... Well, it's not usually that long. But I think that's what he's asking for. Sorry. Come on, Poodle. You behave yourself. Good boy. So, this dog literally goes out in the garden, goes to the first bush outside the door, and pees, and then charges straight back in. I do love his... He has a quest for efficiency. NER, I don't think you would base a Royal Navy light cruiser at the island, because again, you might have some of the older ones, I suppose, but it's not really needed. If you've got, on the island, big enough guns, and we could be talking, again, in this scenario, it's going to depend on what the ships are having at this point, but let's say it's been upgraded with at least the previous generation of battleship guns, so we're talking about probably 14-inch guns at this time, maybe even 16-inch guns, but probably 14-inch guns. Or 14-inch, or, you know, they've got the same guns as the Dreadnought possibly could have at this point. Because my suspicion is that everyone's going to be playing more of a gun game. Then, frankly, you're not looking at a scenario where you're going to need to find the advantage of a few 4-inch or 5-inch guns from cruisers are going to be that helpful. Anything which requires a bigger gun than the destroyers will have to fight is going to be the focus of the Fortress's guns. Anything which is a destroyer grade to fight, the destroyers will quite happily be fighting. So, yeah. The one interesting thing I do see in this scenario, perhaps, and this is what I put through together for my version of maybe a Dreadnought, HMS Dreadnought, sort of Dreadnought sort of starship in this period as first generation battleship, is that she's got the same secondary armament as Dreadnought has, but instead instead of having 12-inch, she has 14-inch guns. And she has a triple turret forward and 4 twins, because I've got the twins off the Lord Nelson class proceeding, because I could see them still being twins, but let's be honest, if you're building a scenario and you're thinking about we need number of guns, and you're ordering that 5th turret, which is what Fisher did historically, you might be tempted to ask Vickers for that triple turret design, which they're working on at that point. And if you get with that then gives you a broadside increase of 1 gun, but also gives you a forward firing increase of 1 gun, and that can be useful for salvoing, for ranging fire, etc. And I wouldn't be surprised if after this, the ships after it become triples, at least on the centre line, and then maybe when they lose their twins, entirely twin wing turrets, entirely triples. Government, have you seen the pegboard doors for the Calyx? Stops books falling out the back and gives you more hanging storage space. The pegboard ones are they're not. I don't think they're necessarily for Calyx. I think they're for Billies. They're not for Calyxes. I haven't seen doors for Calyxes. I think they're for the Billies, because I know, because I fitted them on my sister's belly backs. And I did look for for doors, but basically, if you want to get doors on the calyxes, you have to put in one of the oak insert, one of the inserts which have the doors. And I don't really want that, because I'd like to access both sides of my calyxes and have books on both sides, able to get into books both sides, so they're all packed double deep. So that didn't really suit me, because it wouldn't really work for my requirements. But thank you for the suggestion. Yeah, you're talking. I think you're talking about the inserts, Colin, and they're lovely, but they're not really for my needs. But they're mostly they're for the calyxes. So back to the question at hand. Summary. Yeah, this is advantageous for the British, but it's also a case of it was given up for a reason. The British hadn't really been bothered to fortify it. The British hadn't needed to fortify it, and as it was historically, they'd have had to come up with a reason for fortifying if they kept on it after 1890 if things had gone as historically had. If you got the reason because you have fortified it, you have been using it like a Gibraltar of the North, then you're going to maintain it. You're going to keep it. In which case, it's going to be a very advantageous position for World War One. World War Two could be different. I could well see the Germans trying to take it by air power, with paratrooper invasion. I can see it also being defended quite well against paratrooper invasion, because again, kind of like Gibraltar and Malta, it's going to be a known area which they're going to prepare defences, and they're going to have a well-defined defensive plan which they've worked out beforehand. And so they're not going to get a surprise. Also, if you have got those fortified defences and they have been fortified enough in World War One and have been maintained, then that's going to be a problem for the Germans in terms of taking it by force. Yes, they're going to have railway guns. Yes, there are large guns they can use to fire it, but unlike Jersey, it's probably not going to be abandoned. And the reality is, if you aren't abandoning it, it's going to be a big problem for the Germans, because if you have radar and fighters there to defend it, and technically you could probably fly fighters to it from the UK homeland. It's a bit far, but it's also not an impossible thing, and it could be a criteria that's woven into all their designs. They have to be able to fly from the UK to the Helgoland. That would be, that would probably what would happen. That would become a criteria for UK fighters, especially with the generation, the Hurricane and Spitfire. They have to have the range in their fuel tanks to be able to get them to ferry fly, in a ferry condition, to fly over there. Then you would have a big problem for the Germans in terms of your bomber raids, in terms of your approach to the North Sea, in terms of how you get to sea. It's going to be really a problem for things like your invasion of Norway, etc., because you're going to have to go through the Straits of Denmark, etc. Admittedly, you do invade Denmark, but invading Denmark is going to be more of an issue, because the British are going to be better poised to interfere. British are going to be better poised to interfere, full stop. So it's basically a problem. I think the Germans would end up bombing Helgoland to absolute pieces, but again, I could see the British evacuating the civilians early on in the contest, like the Germans did themselves in World War One. And if you evacuate the civilians early enough on, and you defend it with enough forces, it's not going to fall. You can bomb it as much as you like, but if everything's dug into the underground underneath it, those bombs, whilst they're going to be annoying and going to keep hitting, they're not going to cause ultimately much of a problem. They're just going to ravage the surface of it. Building a second seafort line built around Helgoland. Not really in this time period, I doubt that, but the Germans could invest in all sorts of things to try and get there. There is going to be a lot of interest, a lot of discussion into the gun scenario and into the firepower scenario in that sense. But I think also for the Germans, you have to remember Helgoland, if it's been key to their defeat in World War One, Hitler is going to be obsessed with it in World War Two. Getting it in World War Two is going to be his criteria. It's going to be a principal thing. It might even be something he tries to launch forces for to attack before even the invasion of Norway. In any scenario, it could be we have to take Helgoland out first. And that could be a real problem, because it could mean they could lose critical forces in it. Again, a small defensible asset could be a massive problem for them. And again, with the way the war is declared on the Germans, with the fact the British go right, and if you have not withdrawn from Poland or are not attempting to by this point, war will be considered to take place. That gives you time to evacuate the island. That gives you time to swing out an evacuation plan and a reinforcement plan for the island. And the British will have them. The British will have a reinforcement plan. So it will be to an extent the Malta, Gibraltar of the North Sea. But it's smaller and more condensed and even more difficult to try and get it a hold of. Prince Turgo, fighters getting the Helgoland during World War II means drop tanks will be a thing from the 30s generation. Potentially. It would certainly allow them to get there and fight if they arrive, but I said I think it could be internal fuel requirements, because it's not that far from the UK. It's not that beyond scenarios. There's also a possibility that two-engine fighters get pushed a bit more. Maybe something like the Mosquito comes about slightly earlier, but not a bow fighter. But yeah, they're going to be pushing for things. But it would be a major part of British security process of focus to keep it, because it'd be worth its weight in gold. There's also the very real reality it changes, as I said, the naval war of World War One and World War Two and World War One quite dramatically, and could change the one of World War Two one quite dramatically. There is also the sincere possibility that the Germans decide, as a whole, that the navy's not worth investing in. That because of Helgoland, there's no point in having a navy. That navy is just for coastal forces and coast protection, and don't put any money into the navy at all, and completely ignore Helgoland in World War Two. And there's a very real scenario in that case that the British don't bother as much about the Germans. Although without the navy, the Germans can't do Scandinavia, so they can't go for Norway, and they certainly can't coerce Sweden as much as they did in the war. Which gives all sorts of different options for Finland to seek allies. There is also the sincere problem that if they don't have the naval forces they had, then it's going to change what's a raid against the Italians in the Mediterranean, because if the Germans have not invested in the Panzerschief, let alone the the Panzerschief, let alone the Scharnhorst, Gneisenau, and Bismarcks, then frankly the Royal Navy is going to concentrate all its capital ships on the Mediterranean. So the Italians will have to deal with the Queen Elizabeths, the King George V's, and everything else that can be chucked at them, which is probably going to be pretty problematic, and all the carriers as well. That's going to be an issue. Yes, the British will probably need carriers for the ongoing convoy operations to resupply Helgoland occasionally, but that's not going to be, again, the same thing as Gibraltar or supplying Malta, because you're not going to be running Gauntlet for a long time. You're going to be running in and running out. And you're going to be behind, which Helgoland is going to be able to shield quite a lot of the attacks against its own convoys, so it's going to be a very different scenario. You're probably going to have to deal with an anti-submarine warfare patrol by Coastal Command, constantly patrolling backwards and forwards behind there to kind of keep a channel clear of German submarines as best you can. Which is going to be a problem for the Germans. There's probably also going to be a line of hydrophones, and this is not something I covered in the World War I scenario, but I wouldn't be surprised if you do find hydrophones laid around the area, which will make it more difficult for submarines to ambush anything, because they're going to be heard from ashore. Yeah, pretty much. It'll be an ocean liner. Will as you put Black Maxwell, it'll be an ocean liner. Will go straight out loaded with troops, and will come back with all the civilians. And yeah, it would be a nightmare for the Germans to deal with. It's one of those things where, honestly, you probably would require a nuke to block it. Yeah. Some of the freighters might end up staying, but there's also the very real scenario that you're talking about an island which is going to be close enough that you can do a lot of resupply by flying boat, by bomber. You can do a lot of transporting in for things by air power. Large Sunderland flying boat, probably the easiest one to put in. And they'll probably be landing and taking off every night, and there'll be multiple of them arriving each night, and then dropping stuff off and then going back. It's going to be an issue to deal with, because there are ways you can have the island being resupplied, getting in, getting out. And keeping that radar operational is going to be critical, because if you have a radar from Helgoland operating to cover Germany, that's going to provide so much support for your bombers when they're going in their operations. Again, imagine if you're basing fighters from Helgoland, then you've got fighter coverage for quite large swathes over Germany. There's a large swathe of Germany which those fighters can provide escort for your bombers over. Or it can at least be doing interdiction and attacking things. Yes, it will be expensive to keep them supplied, but keeping them supplied is going to keep a lot of German resources very much focused on them. And if the Germans can only do the southern attacks into Norway, which is a possibility, they only being able to do the southern attacks into Norway and only attacking from that direction, then that changes things again. Because that's going to mean that their attacks on central Norway, northern Norway don't happen, in which case the Norwegian forces are going to be very differently spread. The Norwegian forces are probably going to come down through the centre, through Norway, be supported by the Royal Navy, in which case Narvik and those don't fall even if they do attack Norway. And as I said, I'm not sure if Denmark even falls the same way if you've got Helgoland under British control, because there's going to be that causing trouble the whole time. Yay, we're attacking Denmark. Yeah, oh, good lord, the Royal Navy, the Royal Air Force fighters are intercepting our bombers and our parachute transports. Oh, frigate, we've lost this, we've lost that. Oh, we are planning on seizing this. The gliders got shot down. The Danish got a warning from the from Britain about they're in progress. And it wouldn't take much. Literally, it would be a case of probably someone on the island, having a phone line, calling up the Danish headquarters and going, "You're being invaded, by the way." What? Go to full alert. You're being invaded. And suddenly there are all sorts of problems for invading Denmark. We're talking about a group of people who quite literally, and I do emphasize this, quite literally found ways to not hand over people they didn't want to hand over. They managed to get them far away overnight. They managed to spirit Jewish people across the sea and away from Copenhagen, when they didn't want to put any sort. Give them a heads up that the Germans are coming, and yeah, there is going to be a problem. Mostly for you. The Sutherland was used to resupply some of the stuff in Malta. They use submarines and Sutherlands for critical supply runs. That was their standard policy. It was pretty darn effective as well. So yeah, it's going to be a constant. It's going to be a constant problem for the Germans. But do I think Britain might end up trying to get closer relations with some of the Baltic and Scandinavian countries in the situation? Yes and no. Britain could well end up with a close relationship with them, but let's be honest, Britain was the most for most of those countries. Britain was their number one arms supplier. There's a reason why the Latvians had a British submarine. Why the Estonians had a British Lithuania, Estonia, Latvia. It was, I think it was It's Tallinn. Why they had a British submarine? Why they built submarine? Why you find so many British-built weapons around there and British patent designs and British Swedish designs in that area? There is a reason for that, and it's mostly due to the various agreements in place. So yeah. It's going to be a massive problem for the Germans to deal with. And they're going to spend their time dealing with it. They have to. Although they probably won't want to. As said, they don't really have the option to ignore it. And with the thing of, especially the Kaiser, there's no chance of them ignoring it. And I don't think Hitler's really the type who's going to be able to ignore it. No. So, there are issues coming up at the moment, apparently. I'm getting told I've got poor video upload at the moment. I don't know why. If you're noticing it, I'm watching on the system and it looks okay to me, but that might be me. I don't know. I don't know what's going on this one. I really don't. It's being fun. It often is. It does look okay to me. But yeah, YouTube sometimes likes to do complaining. So, Japanese Americans seeing how the British fortify Helgoland. Write that down. Yes, pretty much the main trouble you're going to get longer term, I would say, is in a post-World War I. In any scenario where Helgoland has been British, I don't think, as said, I think you have a major battle in 1914 with the Royal Navy versus the Grand Fleet versus the High Seas Fleet, and it's going to be as much of the Royal Navy as they can get, not just the Grand Fleet. I have a feeling that battle's going to decide the war. If it's won by the British, then I think war could be over by Christmas, especially if the British have pushed battle cruisers into the Baltic while doing the battle, and then try and push some pre-dreads through the Kiel Canal. Again, that's going to be running into sea defences, and you might go, we won't do that. But the thing is, if you've just won that bigger battle and you've got all the rest of the force coming behind it, you might do it, and you might do it. You might lose something, but you might well do it, because the thing is, if you can get a pre-dreadnought, and the reason I'm saying pre-dreadnought is you want it to be something which you don't want to lose, but you don't mind losing if you do lose, through the Kiel Canal. That is going to be such a horrific moment for the German Navy, for the German public, that could well cause peace. And if that does lead to peace by Christmas 1914, there is never going to be a Washington Naval Treaty. But I do also say that any treaty will probably not. And that scenario, you might not lose. The Kaiser might not fall from power. And it might well be seen that the thing that's lost is the Navy, not the Army. So the Navy and the Army can claim they were stabbed in the back by the Navy, and they should never have gone to war against Britain. Because that's it. And you could end up with a whole scenario where the Germans basically start to base their entire strategic future around being allied with Britain, which could cause all sorts of interesting things for an ongoing scenario. Christmas of what year? I'm saying it could be Christmas 1914. Because if the German High Seas Fleet is broken in August 1914, then the Royal Navy has September, October, November, December to end the war. And if you already have battle cruisers appearing off the coast of the Baltic coast of Germany in August, and all the rest, then frankly it's very quickly going to be a case of the Army's winning, the Navy's lost, we've lost the war. Would it be worth almost cuddling a ship in the canal to try and block it? Oh, the British would do that. That's the next best option. Block the Kiel. But nice way, you don't really need to do that in this scenario because you've got Helgoland, so you've blocked the Kiel Canal. You've blocked the Kiel Canal with Helgoland. That's the point. All the shipping channels, all the decent shipping routes are going to go within range of guns firing from Helgoland. And especially within range of destroyers from Helgoland. It's just, yeah, it's not a good scenario for them. So a tripartite pact of UK, Germany and Japan in the 20s. Well, that could be interesting. If you had Germany and Britain both trying to act as stabilizers on Japan in the 20s as the key ally for the army and the key ally for the navy, it could have an interesting factor. I'm not sure how much a factor it would be, but it's tempting. But yeah. So that's today's video pretty much gone. That's, as said, working from bookshelves. Most of these are procured now. I was going to buy... It's now gone. Stream is now apparently healthy. I'm not sure why it was unhealthy with this slide and healthy with this slide. Didn't change anything other than the slide. Well, let's put it this way. In terms of the calyxes, I was originally going to get the 7 black ones I was going to buy and 6 white ones of the 4x2s. And to be honest, how many of those do I have? I got a few chunk of them. It's pretty much just the smaller ones and the these, which I needed roughly. Well, I thought I needed 8 calyxes for that down here for that. 8 and 5, 3 and 5 I got down here, but now it's gonna need. I'm gonna need 4 and 4 of the white and the black down calyxes. So I'm gonna need about 8 of those down here. Might have to up it to 10. Yeah, they're expensive, but they take a lot of books. They do take a lot of books. They're about 60 odd quid, 60 odd quid a set of shelves, and they're worthwhile when you've got heavy duty books. If I take this out and I put this on tap lock, hello. Let's see what we can show you on the bookshelves. So, as you can see, the bookshelves are the whole way along. And the great thing about having a camera I can do this with, I can do this. Hello. See? As you can see, books in there, double stacked the whole way through. Do you want to illustrate or shall I? And we've got that on the same on these and these. They are each holding... Yeah, the bookshelves are about 60 quid. But when you realise that the books on them have an average price of about 40 quid a book, well, it's between 30 and 40 quid a book, and you realise that in here alone there's 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 24 books, 24 books at the minimum in each of these cubby holes, you suddenly start to realise the shelves are kind of worth it. It's kind of like insurance. It's one of those things of, oh, this insurance is expensive. How much does it cost to replace all this? A lot. When you're dealing with 24 times 30, that's going to be £720 worth of books. So probably in here, on this shelf alone, you are dealing with about, and this is a conservative estimate, probably about £6 worth of books. Judging each one is going to be roughly about 30 quid. Let's say 30 quid rather than 40 quid. I'm just going with the lower estimate. But you know, you're dealing with probably roughly £6 worth of books on each bookshelf, because each one is roughly 2,800. At 30 grand a setting, I said some of it's between 30 and 40, so probably about £6 in each of these bookshelves. So that makes 60 quid on a shelf seem rather sensible. Thank you, Prince of Tonga. This is the conversation I actually have with. It's going to sound terrible, but I do have it with students on quite a regular basis. I have this sort of conversation with them on things of when they're buying stuff, and I go, look at what you're buying it to support. Look at what you're doing. When you're talking about the sheer quantity of books and the sheer value of the books, then suddenly you don't want the cheap shelving. You want the shelving which is solid shelving. And I'm not buying the really expensive, weird shelving. I'm buying the very solid shelving for that reason. Have you considered getting some of the shelf inserts for calyxes? Yes and no, Malaga, because if I get some, I do use some inserts, and I have some upstairs for various things. So I also have calyxes upstairs in my bedroom as my main storage solution in my bedroom upstairs. And also for books. In some cases they're for books up there. They're for some of my personal reading books. But they're also for things like storing. I have the inserts for storing clothes, etc. But for books themselves, because I like to have them, because they're all double stacked so I can get both sides, etc., all the inserts cut down on that. All the inserts would cause me trouble with that, so it doesn't really help me. No, it's 60 quid per 4x2. These calyxes themselves are about 60 quid. The white ones are about 55, the black ones are about £60. I do not know why the black ones are £5 more expensive than the white ones. I presume it's because people are prepared to pay that much more for them. But I have the two varieties because I intend to paint the white ones orange. Where did you get the shirt? That you'd have to ask my sister, but I believe it came from Amazon. You stacked that up to the ceiling. I am tempted to stack them up to the ceiling, but I'm not gonna. The thing is, this is gonna sound terrible. I don't want to put them that much higher because I want to put pictures along the walls. And honestly, these walls do not seem that great for load bearing, which is another reason why I got the calyxes rather than the billybacks, because the calyxes can take a lot of weight but are self-supporting. I don't need to tie them into the wall. Yeah, that I didn't see quantity. Yeah, that was the 7 of them, Melanie. Not 420 quid for one set of shelves. Hug. Always a hug. But he does like dancing as well. Thank you, Prince of Turga, by the way. I think I missed the super chat. Thank you. Yeah, I have. There is the thing is I've got is that one of the calyxes I've got in this room I've had since I was 7 years old. It was in my bedroom for years. It was behind me in my book. Remember, there was a calyx actually behind me when I first started broadcasting in my office. I had billy backs around the room, which my sister's now got, and then I had a calyx behind me. And the calyx could always impress me because it could take heavier books than the billy backs, quite happily, and would take a heavier book load. So that's what I've kept to this time. Because they stand independently in the middle of the room, as you can see, and I can have them double stacked in this case. I can have these double stacked, so I have them both sides. And yeah, when you sort of, I said, so when you start looking around and you start doing the maths of the book maths, which I really don't want to do, but if I start doing that, then I realize that I have, well, if that's for eight of them, and I've got, considering how many I've got full up in here, that's 11 times that figure. So I am probably looking at about 60 grand worth of books in here, amassed over a lifetime. That's kind of scary to think about. That's kind of scary to think about. How much longer until the railroad lantern makes an appearance? The railroad lantern is going to the railway, Stafford. And when I say railway, it's going to my model railway. So you're going to be able to see it once I've built my model railway room, which is going in one of the sheds. And it's being turned into a model railway room, and the railway lantern is going to be the lantern giving light to the whole room. It's going to be the light fixture for the entire room. But that's going to be when, how many over 95 quid books? Look, Melanie, it's when you realise that I was looking at a very nice book on Japanese site, which was, I think, let me just check. Yeah, was 15,000 yen, and I wasn't even blinking. That's roughly 75, 76 pounds. I have a lot of books which are, let's put it this way, they were many hours work to acquire. Are you still engaged from Morel? Yes, I do have engage. Did you check the floor's load bearing capacity? Yes, it's fully concrete the whole way through, and very well built concrete. Looking forward to the reveal. Expect that to take longer than the bookshelves to get built, because one's a working job, one's my how do I put this? One's a professional requirement, one's my hobby. So yeah, those one, yeah. On top of the calyxes, I was tempted to do that, but well, there might be a railway might end up going on top of the calyxes, but that's something else. That's honestly, calyxes are more. The space on top of calyxes doesn't really lend itself to engage, unless I include bridging abilities, which I might do that, but that's going to be something after I've got the walls set up. I have considered sticking a railway round the entirety of the room once I've got it all built in properly. Yeah, it's ground floor. Yes, Drac has got problems with being on the first floor. It is a problem for him. Trust me, he is. I am surprised, but I'm sure he'll be coming down to visit my office at some point to go, I would like an office like this. And I keep telling him to do so, he's going to have to move west because, yeah, that it makes sense from the transport perspectives and the pricing perspectives. I wouldn't have expected a blink at 13,000. I have many locks worth more than that. Yeah. But it's a case of, it's when you just go, okay, fine. And you just go, I am spending that much on an old book in a language which I don't read. And I'm just so I can Google Translate it with my phone. This is bad. He's going to have the train bringing him Iron Brew. Tempting. Here comes the crimes. There are so many. But no, it's the fact the book collection keeps growing. And you've got... Let's see. Some of these books... Yeah, they're old friends. But also there are some books in here which equally were a fiver. So this is the point, you know, this is why I average out the prices and I'm giving you just an estimate. I do want my friend closer, yes I do. I do like it. It was nice having... honestly, I would love the whole Shipshape crew to move down here because they are probably my closest friends. Barring Sam, who you know about, and the one of my other friends, well, two of my other friends. That's my closest friend group, and it was to move away from them all was a bit of a because they're all in that area. Sam's closer. She's not that. She's only in Somerset, so she's not as far away. But yeah, it's fun. I spent for. Oh, lots next door. Next door we have a very nice young family. That direction. We have lots of retirees all across the way who seem to be quite happily living here, and we have another family across along. So I don't think they're moving. But is a very nice small holding / stables for sale not that far away, which I am going to be suggesting. How many thousands of pounds? Don't get me started. You do realise I blew my book budget in Scandinavia in the budget I set myself within about the first 2 weeks. I remember poor Knight thought I'd gone bankrupt or something because I said I'd blow my budget. And I went, no, it's just honestly means I'm cutting back on my food budget and I've spent more money than I was supposed to on books. I don't know how... yeah, I'm going to have to seriously find a way to increase my income to afford the Japan trip in terms of books and procuring things. I hear food out there is very reasonable, but yeah, books I'm going to be spending a lot on them. And then there's getting them back to the UK. Oh, don't get started, Stafford. Don't get started. Train bringing me Iron Brew is still very tempting. I was just going to train you to carry it to me in a cask around your neck. You don't think that's a good idea? You try and drink it? Poodles. You're a good boy. Now, yeah, don't get me started on that. My family does worry about me. Probably sensibly so. But it's a case of this is what again. It's why am I talking about this? And sometimes when I talk about this, especially with students, when I'm talking to them about setting themselves up as an academic life and doing these things, they get there's almost a reaction that you're bragging, and I go, no, you have to understand the costs of what you're getting into. You have to understand the realities, what the price you're going to be paying for journal access every year, what the prices you're going to be paying for sorting out the costs of the things you're going to be doing. They're going to cost you money. Academia.edu costs money. All these things cost money. You don't get anything for free. And so you need to work out how you're going to cover those costs, what you're going to pay it with. This is why every Monday I spend about an hour poring over an Excel spreadsheet of costs and budget planning. Because that's what you have to do. It's that simple. And I know myself well enough to build in a reserve into certain things so that if I do, especially with I manage to be quite good when I'm at home on book spending, but I do say in terms of predicting the book spending and keeping it in line. But it's when I'm on the things like the Scandinavia trip, like the Australia trip, where I know if I see a book which is not for sale in the UK and I might never get a chance to pick it up, especially in the second-hand store. The new books I don't tend to bother with, but because I can usually buy and order them from something. It's like I have an account. There's a reason I have an account with the Japanese Amazon Japan. There is a reason I have these things set up, and there's a reason I have an account set up in various different systems like that to get the books. But the thing is, you do that, you acquire them, but the older books, the second-hand books, the books you find in stores, well, that's a different scenario. That's a different thing. That's something which is going to be far more difficult to get hold of and to replicate, so you have to make the decision and get it at a time, and that's a case of this is an opportunity cost. This is an opportunity to get this. I have to decide if the cost is worth it, if blowing my budget is worth it. And I have to factor in money, therefore, to do it. Why don't I ever do something with John Parshall? I'd be happy to. It's one of the things of I'm actually trying to get a whole load of historians. Basically, I have to say I'm starting off this year with the academic historians because I've got the 2 historian series starting off with Drac. And I'm pretty much starting off with the academic historians who you don't hear about on YouTube that often and trying to ask them. And then I'm going to ask people who are non-academic historians, who maybe include YouTube historians and other people who are prepared to be on, who are more comfortable being on YouTube, to come and talk. Because the idea is I want to try and get people who you don't normally have talking away. No? Stafford, don't take this the wrong way, but my mum would never tell me off for buying books. She doesn't have a leg to stand on that subject. She doesn't. She really doesn't. A, she's bought a fair number of these for me over the years. And B, she does it herself. As I was quite honest with you all, when we were moving, the biggest book collection to move was mine, but my mum's was the second biggest, and my sister's was a third. And my mum's was not as far behind mine as you might think, and her office is full to the gills of books. Full to the gills. So yeah. Alright, I'm going to say thank you very much, everyone, for being here. Hope you enjoyed, and I'll be on Discord in a bit. I'm going to take someone off to his bedtime, because I think he's supposed to be in his bedtime, and his bed is not in here, is it? Your bed is with Mummy, actually, in Mummy's room. Technically, it's on the floor, but you haven't been sleeping on the floor at all recently, have you? But we won't discuss that now, because you're supposed to be sleeping on the floor, not on the human bed, but hey-ho. So we'll take him off to that, and I'll be on Discord for a bit. Hope you're all well. Hope you're enjoying life. Anything good we've got coming up? Hello. We have the French and other navies, World War II, Naval Aviation Doctrine. Saying that, I think someone might have been coming to pick you up. Oh, they are. They're here. I think your chauffeur for the evening is here. Oh no, you've brought him food. I thought you'd be taking him to bed. You even said brought him food. Is he sleeping over tonight?
No, has he actually eaten all the other food?
Which other food? Oh, that, yeah.
He's had the whole pot of kibble.
Yeah, he's had a whole pot of kibble today.
That's good, isn't it?
Well, no, he's had a whole pot of kibble in his bowl.
Has he actually eaten it?
Well, you can go and look at the bowl and decide for yourself. There you go.
While you've been live, I've been moving wood and offcuts of slabs.
I told you to leave it for me.
Well, you've got other jobs.
Okay, I've got other jobs, but nicest way. The thing is not to ask me at 7:15 on a Thursday.
No, that was for the bit. That was for the bins.
Yeah.
It did actually remind you about bin night. Yeah, yesterday evening, but I obviously forgot to remind you this morning.
You did.
Yes, so that was my fault.
You forgot to remind me.
Yeah, I but I'd already piled it all up. You'd only had to go from there to there.
And it was good exercise for you.
Yeah, I've moved all the timber as well.
That you shouldn't have done. You should have just left it for me. It would have got done. Yeah, they're all chatting away.
Good, I'm glad they're all chatting away. Check your phone.
Oh, great. What's happened now? You having a chicken? Have you eaten your chicken already?
No.
You sure you haven't eaten all your chicken already? Because I know you and chicken.
Did I not give you enough? No, you haven't eaten chicken.
You just don't think there's enough as a starter point, Raleigh. Oh, sisters, yes, sisters. The dreaded other jobs. Yeah, it's a fun thing. They happen. Do a key ship for April 1st next year. Hosh. Wouldn't that be a little bit cruel? Lot tempting, but cruel. Tempting, but cruel.
Yes, but I might get you back with something worse.
You don't care if I do the Hosh.
Huh?
Yeah, that's the key ship for next year. Tempting but cruel, the Hosh. Or are you a fan of the Fleet of Oceans as well and protecting him like the mum does?
I've got no idea what you're talking about. Don't.
You have no idea from my colleagues. That's strange for you. That's so unusual. It's like, I know your colleagues so well. There's Amanda. I know her. She occasionally watches the channel and comments. You remember me, Amanda. Right. So, anyway, I will stop torturing my sister. Thank you, Charles. Thank you, Stafford and Steve. Thank you, everyone, for being here. Well, we've got to come out and said next week it's going to be French and other nations World War II carry naval aviation doctrine. Tomorrow it's going to be the first of the new series of key aircraft have returned, and apparently the poodle is waving. I'm not sure the poodle chose to wave or the poodle is being forced to wave. Anyway.
I think the poodle's actually demanding biscuits. But
The poodle is always demanding biscuits. Biscuits are the biscuits are the font of life, according to a poodle. Thank you very much, everyone. And yeah, it's French and other naval aviation. Tomorrow night, it's going to be a key aircraft video is going to come out, and hopefully you enjoy them all. What the? Are you moving my train around? Why are you moving my train around?
Well, I thought it was rather cute.
It is cute.
I put it in the wrong place.
Now it's behind my head, though. Take care, everyone. I'm going to go deal with the mutinies in progress in my office before beering on Discord. Thank you, Blackburn Maximus. Thank you, Mr. Thompson. Thank you, Prince of Toga and Ian Morrison. Everyone, hope you have a good time, and toodles. Thank you, everyone, John Shea, and thank you all the admins who've been on. Melanie, Runon, Steve Clarke, Leslie, Seneca, Stafford, everyone who's been working. Thank you, everyone who's been here this evening. Hope you enjoyed it. And yeah, recorded video version of this comes out not Saturday, but next Saturday. And this Saturday it's Battle of Santa Cruz. Hello, yes, I'll put you in the garden. Yeah, that's how I deal with the mutinies. I put you in the garden, and you have a lovely time. You eating your food? You happy with eating your food? Good boy. Good boy. Big hug for Papa. Big hug. Oh, yeah, you good boy. That was okay? Yeah, it was you good boy. Yeah, it's you good boy. All right.